So I'm going live. I have a little bit of Thievery Corporation in the background. DC Pride. Oh yeah, they're a local group. Thievery Corporation. If you don't know, late in the evening on September 20th, Thursday, I'm going to be discussing sexual assault and white male privilege. Obviously, very, very appropriate right now if you're paying attention to what's happening in the news with Judge Kavanaugh being appointed to the Supreme Court and an accuser of his, Dr. Ford. So let me try and show this at a couple more places. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. So that's a little Thievery Corporation song. Thievery Corporation. They're Washingtonians like me. September 20th, Thursday. So this is the XX playing in the background now. See? The XX. So, what's happening right now is, sometimes you got to ask yourself if it's 1991 or 2018. In 1991, I was in college. Music I was listening to was a lot of like New Order, Erasure. It's when I first really started getting into a lot of electronica. Now I'm more like into this mellow, loungy, like down-tempo electronica that's playing in the background now. Back then I was much more into the dance scene. That was when I really should have known that I was really gay. The electronic dance music, which they call EDM nowadays, everything's by an acronym nowadays. And what also was going on in 1991 was Anita Hill, the accusation against Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas. And I actually knew people who knew Clarence Thomas, actually. I won't reveal too much about that, but yeah, Clarence Thomas was from Missouri, and I knew well-connected people from Missouri that were in my college with me. And I believed Anita Hill. And at that time, President Bush 1 called for an FBI investigation, and they did an FBI investigation just before she testified. This time, the accuser herself, Dr. Ford, is calling for an FBI investigation, and the person that could do that would be the president. It's within his jurisdiction, just like Bush 1 had done. But Trump is not doing that. He just sort of lays back and said, well, that's not really their thing. Investigating crimes, I guess, is not the FBI's thing. Surprise, surprise. Everything's a little strange in Trump world, of course. We know this already. But why would an accuser not, if they're calling for an FBI investigation, the FBI would look through that person's whole life, their history, their family connections, their friend connections, everything. It's a pretty deep dive when the FBI is investigating you. So if you're coming up with a false claim, why would you ever call for an FBI investigation if you know that your claim is false? So therefore, that's yet another reason why I believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. She's adamantly calling for an FBI investigation, and Trump won't pick up the phone and order them to do so, like Bush 1 had done in Anita Hill's situation. The other thing is the Republicans are insisting that she rapidly testify on Monday, this coming Monday, and that's all bets are off if she doesn't come and testify there. Now they're giving her the option of public or private testimony. Um, we're talking about somebody who's just coming to terms with this, who's not talked about it much for 36 years. She talked about it back in 2012 in, I believe, couples therapy with her husband, with a psychiatrist. And I think that's the first time, in 30 years that she had really ever talked about it in any depth. So now, 2018, 6 years from that therapy session, she's being yanked into the public limelight, and they're demanding that she quickly testify. This is still obviously something she's coming to terms with. And people should keep in mind that when this went down, she was a child. She was a minor. She was 15 years old. Brett Kavanaugh was 2 years older, 17. So I think 17 in Maryland is right on the cusp of consent, but a 15-year-old clearly not at age of consent. But that's neither here nor there, because the claim is that it was against her will. It was assault. It was really attempted rape. I believe Dr. Ford, just like I believed Anita Hill. Now, in Anita Hill's time, here's a black woman going up against a well-respected black male judge who had been sexually harassed and she laid some accusations in them, and she was pulled in front of the public limelight. And she's questioned me. All members of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate in 1991 were 17 white men, almost all older white men. In the ultimate position of power, you get to the U.S. Senate. I mean, the only thing more powerful than that you could say is a Supreme Court justice or the president, obviously. All white men questioning this black woman, casting doubts upon her accusations almost from the get-go. And it wasn't handled well. And Joe Biden from Delaware, our now Vice President, he was Senator Joe Biden then, of course, was chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And now, in 2018, he's saying he owes Anita Hill an apology for the way it turned into an absolute circus. Well, I think this is going to, with Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford, this is going to turn into a circus too. It's all political motivations, a political football. I blame both the Democrats and Republicans, really, in some ways. It is going to be a political football. But in the middle of this is a woman who's coming to terms with brutal assault that happened to her when she was a young teenager, 15 years old. And in the midst of this, now her family and her are facing death threats. They couldn't stay inside their house. Who knows where they're staying now? Maybe they're in a safe house. Maybe they just had to sort of go underground and not tell anybody where they were. But they couldn't remain in their house because the number of death threats were flooding in as soon as her name was made public. So she's grappling with that as well. So I think it's ridiculous. I really think it's ridiculous the Republicans are demanding that she has to testify on Monday. But I do wonder why the letter that Dr. Ford sent her congresswoman and her congresswoman forwarded to Senator Dianne Feinstein. Why did Feinstein not send that to the FBI for an investigation sooner? Why did she sit on that until basically the end of Kavanaugh's testimony hearings? What was it, September 11th, September 12th, when she finally revealed that she had this letter, and at the same time she was saying, no, the same day I'm sending it over to the FBI investigation. She had it since July. So again, it's a political football. I've never really liked Dianne Feinstein. I don't know why she didn't send it over to the FBI sooner. So now we're in this situation, and it's most likely going to turn into a political football. And growing up in D.C., in the D.C. area, I personally didn't know anybody that went to Georgetown Preparatory because they were like not in my circle of peers at all. I mean, I knew some people, Sidwell and St. Albans, two very prestigious schools, but like Georgetown Prep is like the ultimate in privilege, like rich white privilege, and Holton Arms is the sister school for girls that Ford went to. Holton Arms and Kavanaugh was at Georgetown Prep. Gorsuch, Trump's previous Supreme Court nominee, who's on the Supreme Court now, who's also very conservative, was also a graduate of Georgetown Prep. And Georgetown Prep does have a reputation of a lot of partying. I think even more so back in like the 70s and 80s, and this happened in the early 80s, than it does now. But yeah, I was in middle school, about to go into like junior high and senior high school at that point. But they're like, these people were like 8 or 9 years older than me. 7 or 8 years, something like 7 or 8 years older than me. Yeah, I mean, they were not even my peer circle at all, and I'm not from like a seriously poor background either. That is like, Georgetown Prep is like ultra rich. Holton Arms is like ultra rich. And you get to that position of power where people's parents are senators and Supreme Court, on the Supreme Court, and in very high level lobbying positions, corporate attorney, very high level corporate attorneys. That's who the parents are of students at Georgetown Prep and Holton Arms. So his friend, what was his first name? Something Judge, Brett Kavanaugh's friend Judge, wrote this book called Wasted. I kind of want to buy it. And there's a friend of his in there that goes by the name Bart O. Kavanaugh. It's obvious, everybody knows they were friends. She says that Judge was in the room with them when Kavanaugh attacked her, assaulted her, really. And it was clearly an attempted rape. And Judge is saying, I have no recollection of that. He said a couple different things now. At first he said, no, that sounds crazy. There's no way that happened. That didn't happen. Then he said, I don't recall. And so his book, Wasted, about his high school years at Georgetown Prep was, they were wasted. They were like falling down drunk. And Kavanaugh was one of Judge's friends. They would be stumbling drunk all over the place on the weekends and sometimes at night during the week even. So this happened 36 years ago, and just because Judge doesn't recall it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. When you're so fucked up drunk and you're stumbling down, your recall is not real good. Sometimes you're really unaware of where you are. You're really out of it. Hence the phrase wasted. So, and he talks about in his book about the amount of privilege they had and that they were able to get away with a lot more than he talks about this in the book. And I want to read it, but I've read the summaries of the book, and he talks about how he was surprised that they were able to get away with as much as they did due to their privilege. The history of like sexual assault and rape in this country is pretty pathetic. Often the victim is re-victimized by going to the police, then trying to prosecute their attacker and go to trial. They're re-victimized and they're totally re-traumatized by the whole event again and again. And then their truthfulness is questioned, their integrity is questioned. For the longest time, it was like, it's not really accepted anymore, but for the longest time, the question was always posed, well, what were you wearing? Were you alluring him or something, you know? Um, again, placing the blame on the victim, re-victimizing the victim in a way, putting all the blame on the victim. And so the male, most often a white male, is given the privilege to be seen above it all. And that's what we're seeing again. And it's pretty sick. So just wanted to talk about that and say, in some regards, we really haven't we haven't evolved on this issue much beyond where we were in 1991. That's all. I just want to share my ideas about that. I think that I really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, 24 hours ago, I thought they're going to defeat Kavanaugh, or Trump would, at the 11th and a half hour, pull his appointment, pull Kavanaugh's name, pull him out of there. It was either that or that they were narrowly going to vote him down. Murkowski and Flake and Collins. I'm not so sure Corker, but I think the three of them, Flake, Collins, Murkowski, were going to vote against him, and he was going to fail his appointment to the Supreme Court would fail. That was where I was at 24 hours ago. Now, late on Thursday night, I'm not so sure anymore. I think he might be able to squeak by. They might even have to bring in Mike Pence to do the tiebreaker again. I'm really in the middle somewhere. I'm not sure at all how it's going to turn out, but I think it's going to be very ugly for Dr. Ford and her family, and that's sad, really sad. So that's all I've got for this week. I'm trying to do this every Thursday. Okay, thanks for joining me. Good night.